The night air was heavy with the scent of salt and jasmine, the ocean murmuring softly in the distance. Just beyond the glow of the beachfront resort, where champagne glasses clinked and music floated from the terrace, a different kind of silence waited, one that wrapped itself around Alexander Hale like a warning. He stood alone by the edge of the water, his tailored shirt unbuttoned at the collar, shoes in hand. The billionaire wasn't used to quiet, not this kind. And that's when he heard it, a small, breathless voice carried on the wind. "Please, she's too weak to beg." Alexander turned sharply. A little girl stood under a flickering lamppost near the resort side road. She looked out of place, barefoot, her dress rumpled, curls tangled with sand. Her voice had cracked, not with fear, but with desperation. "Where are your parents?" he asked, frowning. She didn't answer. She just looked at him with wide, pleading eyes and turned to walk down the path behind the dunes. And something about her, something in the hollow way she moved, made him follow without a word. They reached a rusted sedan parked near the service alley, half swallowed by darkness. The girl's tiny hand pointed toward the trunk. There was no sound but the crashing of waves and the faint ticking of the cooling car engine. He hesitated, dread twisting in his chest. Then he opened the trunk, and inside, curled and motionless, lay a woman, thin, bruised, and barely breathing. Her skin was pale under the moonlight, her lips cracked and dry. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days. And suddenly, the little girl's words made sense. "She's too weak to beg." Alexander stared at the two of them, this broken stranger and the child who had found him, and something inside him shifted. It was the moment everything changed.
Alexander stood frozen, staring down at the broken figure curled inside the trunk. His breath caught in his throat. For a moment, everything fell silent, even the waves, even his heartbeat. It couldn't be, but it was. Celeste. Her name cracked through him like lightning through glass. Her face was thinner now, pale and bruised, her once glossy hair matted against her face. But even through the blood and dirt, he knew her like a song he had never forgotten. The woman who had vanished years ago, without a trace, without goodbye. The little girl tugged at his hand gently. "She's my mama." Alexander turned slowly to her, the same wide hazel eyes, the same soft slope of the cheek. He looked from the girl to the woman in the trunk, and a terrible truth settled into his bones. This child was hers, and possibly his. He fumbled for his phone, hands shaking as he called emergency services. "This is Alexander Hale. I need an ambulance, now." Minutes later, red lights pierced the night. Paramedics worked quickly, lifting Celeste gently onto a stretcher. Her pulse was weak, her breathing shallow, but she was alive. Alexander never moved from her side. He knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead, his voice cracking as he whispered her name. "Celeste, it's me." She didn't respond. The little girl, Lily, stood beside him silently, her tiny hand gripping his sleeve. "You found her. I knew you would." In that moment, Alexander's world shifted again. The past wasn't buried. It was still breathing, barely, but alive. And now it was in his arms.
The sterile scent of antiseptic clung to the air, but the moment Celeste was wheeled through the ER doors, Alexander stayed close. He didn't leave her side. Not when the doctors checked her vitals. Not when the nurses whispered about trauma, starvation, and time lost. And not when she finally slipped into a room of her own, pale beneath the soft white sheets, Outside, in the waiting lounge, Lily curled up on a cushioned bench. She clutched a juice box tightly, her face quiet but calm for a child who had seen so much. Alexander sat beside her, unsure of what to say. He had never been good with children, especially not ones who might carry pieces of his past. She spoke first. She said if anything ever happened, I should find you. Alexander looked at her, stunned. How did you find me? Lily shrugged. Mama said your name was Alexei. She said your voice would still sound safe. That name hit him like a wave. Only one person had ever called him that. Celeste, in her soft French accent, back when the world was bright and they still believed in always. He turned to Lily, studying her more closely. She had her mother's quiet strength and his eyes. It wasn't just a coincidence. She wasn't just a child. She was his child. The room across the hall beeped softly. Celeste was stable but unconscious. Alexander felt the weight of everything pressing down on him. Regret, grief, a strange, fierce protectiveness. He gently wrapped his arm around Lily, and she leaned into him with surprising trust. She'll wake up, Lily whispered. She said you always keep your promises. And for the first time in years, Alexander made one silently. He wouldn't leave again. Not her, not Celeste, not this second chance he never thought he'd get.
Celeste drifted in and out of sleep, her body healing slowly, but her mind trapped in the past. Each time her eyes opened, she searched for something familiar. Her daughter's voice, Alexander's steady presence, but even comfort felt fragile. In the quiet hours, trauma bled into memory. Sometimes she whispered in French or jolted awake in panic. Nurses noted it gently, but Alexander saw the pain behind every twitch. He remembered her once, bright, untamed, painting fire orange sunsets with her fingers in his city apartment. She used to laugh mid-argument, challenge his corporate world with paint-streaked hands and fearless eyes. But now even her breath seemed apologetic. In the still evenings, Lily sat beside her with crayons and a sketch pad. She drew suns over the sea, stars above trees, always with her tiny hand holding someone else's. Sometimes softly, she'd hum a lullaby, the same one Celeste once sang to Alexander on stormy nights. When Celeste stirred at the sound, a tear would slip down her cheek. Alexander watched from the corner of the room, guilt weighing heavily. He remembered the last night he saw Celeste, how her voice trembled when she said, I can't become someone I'm not, Alex. And then nothing. Her car, the cliffs, silence. Now she was here, alive, broken, and with a child who carried pieces of both of them. But the question that haunted him most was how. Late at night, Alexander returned to his private study in the city. Cold, sterile, surrounded by files. He began pulling old documents, shell company names, and donation records. He used burner phones to reach out to contacts across Europe, digging for rumors about trafficking routes and secret transactions. One name came up too often to be a coincidence. Mr. Hale. His father. Alexander didn't want to believe it, but if there was a connection between Lux Meyer's so-called charity arm and what happened to Celeste, he had to find it. Because she wasn't just a lost love, she was a survivor. And Lily wasn't just a little girl with soft sketches. She was a witness, a miracle. Alexander looked down at one of her drawings, 3 figures holding hands under a sunrise. And in that moment, he swore silently, I will not fail them again.
The morning light filtered softly into the hospital room, touching Celeste's face as she slowly opened her eyes. Her body was still weak, but something inside her had shifted. No longer just surviving, she was remembering. And for the first time since her rescue, her voice broke the silence. In hushed tones, she began to speak, haltingly at first, about the cold cement floor, the locked rooms, the men who came and went, and then, more clearly, about him, the man everyone obeyed, but no one saw. They called him Mr. Hale. He paid them. He told them to keep me hidden. Alexander froze. The name shattered him. Mr. Hale. It echoed in his chest like a curse, and though she hadn't said it directly, something about the way her eyes searched his told him this wasn't just coincidence. Back at his penthouse that evening, Alexander stared at the skyline in silence. His hands were clenched in his lap, his jaw set. Could his father, powerful, ruthless, respected, really have orchestrated something so horrifying? The pieces didn't make sense, but Celeste's story was real. Her scars were real, and so was Lily. Later, as he returned to the hospital and quietly sat beside her bed, Celeste looked at him, searching for the man she used to love. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Did you know she's your daughter?" Alexander didn't speak. He couldn't. But his eyes filled with a truth no words could hold. He turned to see Lily asleep on the couch, her arms wrapped around her sketch pad. He had missed everything. Her birth, her first words, her first smile. Now, with Celeste beside him and Lily just steps away, a new weight settled over him, not just of guilt, but of responsibility. He wasn't just a man trying to right a wrong anymore. He was a father, and the truth had finally been spoken.
Alexander wasn't the same man anymore, not after Celeste's broken voice whispered the name that haunted his bloodline. Mr. Hale. His father, that one phrase had cracked something inside him wide open. He sat alone in his private office late into the night, poring through encrypted files and offshore records, digging into foundations and charities that bore his family name. One by one, the names unraveled into shell corporations, charities with no real missions, transactions leading to forgotten warehouses and black vehicles with no plates. Each clue tightened the rope in his chest. Then he went deeper, into the old family vault beneath the Hale estate, accessible only through biometric clearance. It was cold and silent, its walls lined with lockboxes and old ledgers. And there, tucked behind a row of antique bonds and gold coins, was something far more intimate. Celeste's silver pendant. He hadn't seen it in years, a delicate charm with her name etched faintly on the back. He had given it to her the night he first told her he loved her. Now it sat in a vault beneath his father's house. He didn't scream, he didn't punch the walls, but his eyes changed too. His breath stilled, and when he left that room, his footsteps were no longer filled with doubt. They were fueled by purpose. Alexander wasn't just trying to protect Celeste anymore. He was going to expose the man who had destroyed all their lives, and this time he wasn't asking for permission.
The days began to soften. In the quiet hum of the hospital room, healing became a slow, sacred thing. Celeste no longer flinched at the sound of footsteps. Her hands, once too weak to lift, now moved gently across blank pages, sketching flowers, faces, and sometimes tiny hands holding hers. Lily sat beside her, humming lullabies only they understood. Alexander visited every day,
never announcing his arrival, never demanding anything. He brought her favorite snacks, old sketches she had left behind, and even the charcoal pencils she once used in art school. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they didn't, but each silence was warmer than the last. In one quiet afternoon, Lily placed one of her own drawings in Alexander's lap, a clumsy sketch of 3 stick figures all holding hands. "It's us! Now no one's missing." That evening, without ceremony or headlines, Alexander walked into the Luxmeyer boardroom, placed his resignation on the table, and left. No speech, no press release, just a final goodbye to the empire that had blinded him to what truly mattered. Back at the hospital, Celeste whispered softly to him as he tucked Lily into bed. "You didn't just find me, Alexei. You brought us back to life."
The city was far behind now. No more reporters, no more security guards or sterile hospital lights. Just the sound of birdsong, the rustle of wind through pine trees, and a gravel path that led to a small wooden cabin tucked against the mountains. Alexander carried Lily on his shoulders as they stepped inside. The cabin was simple but beautiful. Stone fireplace, wooden beams, warm light filtering through hand-sewn curtains. Celeste walked slowly through the space, running her hand along the bookshelves, the old record player, the quiet peace that lived in the walls. It felt like a place where a broken life could begin again. Days passed in the rhythm of firewood, warm meals, shared silences, and healing laughter. Celeste started painting again, not from memory, but from hope. Lily filled the cabin with messy art and giggles, drawing them together in ways words never could. And one night, as snow began to fall outside and the fireplace crackled behind them, Celeste whispered softly, "I remember why I fell in love." Alexander didn't speak. He just reached for her hand, pulled her close, and kissed her, gently, reverently, as if trying to put the pieces of her soul back together with his lips. The snow outside the cabin melted slowly, but the weight of truth inside grew heavier with each passing day. One night, after Lily had gone to bed, Celeste sat across from Alexander by the fire, her hands trembling as she opened up at last. In broken pieces, she spoke of the years she had been kept hidden, moved from place to place, silenced by fear, used as leverage in a powerful man's empire. Her voice cracked as she said the name, "Your father." He was behind it. The next morning, Alexander returned to the city. He tore through files at the Luxmeyer headquarters, passwords and paper trails unraveling in his furious hands, donations to fake charities, offshore accounts, surveillance logs, and hidden beneath it all, evidence linking his father directly to the shell operations that held Celeste captive. The confrontation was cold and electric. In a sleek, glass-walled office, Alexander stood before the man who had raised him. "You destroyed her life," he said, his voice shaking, "and you almost destroyed mine." His father said nothing, only stared back with the same hollow pride that had built empires and broken lives. Alexander walked out without waiting for an answer, a man severing bloodlines for the sake of truth. The room smelled of old books, cigar smoke, and power. Alexander entered with quiet fury, holding a thick folder in his hand, the final piece of a puzzle he had never wanted to solve. Gregory Hale stood by the tall windows, backlit by fading daylight, the image of a man who thought he'd already won. But Alexander wasn't a boy anymore. He laid the evidence on the desk, documents, offshore ledgers, and photographs connecting Gregory to the trafficking network that had shattered Celeste's life. For a long moment, Gregory said nothing. Then, in a voice dry and cold, he offered no defense, only a quiet, hollow admission. It was never about her. It was about control. Alexander's chest burned with disgust. You don't get to decide who's disposable anymore. Not her, not Lily, not me. Without another word, he took the Hale family ring from his finger and placed it on the desk. His voice was steady as he turned to leave. You can keep your legacy. I'm building something better. Behind him, the empire began to feel smaller.
Alexander Hale stood at the podium of Luxmeier's global headquarters, no longer the quiet heir, but a man with purpose in his eyes. The room fell silent as he adjusted the microphone, his voice steady and resolute. Effective immediately, I am resigning from Luxmeier Corporation, he announced. Gasps rippled through the room, but Alexander didn't flinch. He spoke of his complicity in silence, his awakening, and his duty to right the wrongs. Behind him, a large banner was unveiled, the Lily Foundation, named after the daughter he had only just begun to know. He shared his plan, a global initiative focused on rescuing trafficking victims, prosecuting the powerful who profit from silence, and building safe, healing spaces. Celeste watched from the front row, her eyes shining, while Lily sat on her lap, drawing flowers on a notepad. This is no longer about legacy, Alexander said. This is about light, truth, and never turning away again. In that moment, he wasn't a billionaire's son. He was a father, a partner, and a man who had chosen the hard road for the right reasons.
Celeste, once broken and hidden in shadows, now begins to reclaim her voice, not just for herself, but for others like her. After much thought and quiet strength, she agrees to work with the Lily Foundation, joining Alexander's mission not as a symbol, but as a guide. In a sunlit art room inside the Foundation's new shelter, she gently teaches survivors how to express their pain and hope through colors and brushstrokes. Her voice is calm, her presence comforting, and slowly the room fills with drawings of light instead of fear. Alexander watches her with awe as they travel together to different shelters and recovery centers, meeting survivors, listening to stories, and planting the seeds of healing. Lily, now a joyful spark wherever she goes, helps by handing out paintbrushes and hugging women who look like they haven't been hugged in years. Celeste's trauma hasn't vanished, but it's transforming, reshaped through service and love. What was once a story of survival is slowly becoming a legacy of healing.
1 year later, on the anniversary of Celeste's rescue, the world finally sees what was hidden for far too long. Inside a renovated gallery, once a cold, abandoned warehouse, people gather in silence, not for the art alone, but for what it represents. The exhibit is called Return from Silence, a hauntingly beautiful collection of paintings created by survivors. At the center of it all hangs the most powerful piece, a large canvas depicting a rusted sedan under moonlight, its trunk cracked open. Inside are fragments of memory, Celeste's curled form, Lily's tiny hand reaching out, and a soft glow that spills from within, as if hope itself were lighting the way out. Celeste stands beside the painting, trembling yet proud. Dressed in a simple white gown, she holds Lily's hand as reporters and donors remain respectfully quiet. Alexander stays a few steps behind, giving her space to own her moment. The night isn't about tragedy anymore. It's about resilience, about reclaiming the narrative. As the gallery clears out, Celeste turns to Alexander and softly says, "Let's build a world Lily never has to escape from." And in that moment, beneath the warm lights of painted truths, they begin again, not as victims, not even as survivors, but as builders of light.
Months have passed since the gallery opening. Life has slowed into something gentle, something sacred. Celeste now works in a bright, sunlit community center, its walls alive with children's laughter and vivid paintings. She kneels beside little hands, guiding brushstrokes, helping young survivors paint their own journeys. Her eyes are peaceful, yet deep with understanding. She has turned her pain into purpose. Meanwhile, Alexander has traded boardrooms for playgrounds. He's often seen waiting at the center with Lily, now full of confidence and joy. The once silent girl dances in sunlight, humming softly as she colors beside her mother. Their evenings are filled with picnics, bedtime stories, and quiet dinners under fairy lights in the backyard. There's no more fear in their footsteps, only love in the spaces between. This is their real beginning. A family not built by perfection, but by survival, love, and the courage to heal. Art that heals. Love that perseveres. The beginning of everything real again.